Aliens issued a final warning. Humans showed up with popcorn and plans. Hey, space explorers! Before we dive into this epic tale, drop a quick comment below. It really helps the algorithm share these stories with more sci-fi fans like you. I'd love to see who's watching and what you think. The warning came at precisely 14:42 UTC on a Tuesday. Every screen on Earth, television, computer, smartphone, billboard, even the ancient CRT monitor in Dimitri's Moscow electronics shop flickered simultaneously. The image that appeared was imposing. A crystalline being with 6 arms, translucent skin revealing pulsing veins of silver light, and eyes like fractured diamonds. Behind it, a vessel stretched across the void, its bioorganic hull twisted into impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. Inhabitants of the third planet, the creature spoke, its voice a harmonic blend of frequencies that bypassed translation entirely and planted meaning directly into listeners' minds. I am High Arbiter Zixthala of the Confluence. Your species has reached the threshold of interstellar capability. This is your final notification. Across the globe, people stopped mid-stride. Traffic lights continued their eternal cycle, while cars sat motionless beneath them. In coffee shops, baristas froze with steam wands in hand. Children looked up from playgrounds, their games forgotten. You have 72 of your rotations to demonstrate compliance with Galactic Preservation Protocol 847. Cease all expansion beyond your orbital sphere. Dismantle your military capabilities. Submit your technological archives for review. Failure to comply will result in systematic sterilization. The transmission ended as abruptly as it began. Normal programming resumed, but Earth was no longer normal. While governments scrambled into emergency sessions and news anchors struggled to find words, something else was happening in the shadows. Deep beneath the Atacama Desert, in a facility that didn't exist on any official records, Director Kaya Okafor sat in perfect stillness. The bunker around her was a marvel of hidden engineering carved from solid bedrock, lined with metamaterials that bent electromagnetic waves like water around a stone. The walls hummed with barely contained energy, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with potential. Ma'am, her deputy, Lieutenant Commander Ravi Nakamura approached with a tablet clutched in his hands. His usually steady voice carried an undertone of excitement. The confluence signal triggered Protocol 7 automatically. All dormant assets are reporting green across the board. Kaya didn't immediately respond. She was watching a holographic display that showed Earth from space, but this wasn't the Earth that civilians knew. This version sparkled with thousands of tiny lights, each one representing a piece of humanity's true capabilities. Installations on the moon's far side, orbital platforms disguised as space debris, mining operations in the asteroid belt that extracted far more than minerals. 72 hours, she murmured, finally turning to face Ravi. They're being generous. Should we initiate first contact protocols? Kaya smiled, the expression that would have chilled the High Arbiter if he could have seen it. Oh, we're well past first contact, Commander. We've been watching them for decades. 3 levels down in the facility's primary operations center, Dr. Zara Okoye was having entirely too much fun. Surrounded by quantum computers that processed data at speeds that bordered on the supernatural, she pulled up file after file of intercepted confluence communications. Listen to this, she called out to her team, playing back an audio snippet from 6 months prior. The translation software rendered the alien words in crisp English. Sector 7 Alpha remains primitive. Recommend continued observation. Species shows no signs of advanced technology beyond chemical propulsion. Her colleague, Dr. Phoenix Chen Martinez, snorted with laughter while munching on a bag of kettle corn. Chemical propulsion? Did they miss our antimatter drives? Apparently, Zara grinned, pulling up another file. And our gravitational manipulators, and the quantum tunnel network. Oh, and this is my favorite. They classified our AI systems as rudimentary pattern recognition software. The room erupted in chuckles. These weren't just any researchers. They were the architects of humanity's greatest deception. For 40 years, ever since the first confirmed detection of extraterrestrial intelligence, Earth had been playing a very careful game. Dr. Kai Anderson looked up from his workstation, where lines of code scroll past at incomprehensible speeds. Aria's analysis is complete. The Confluence fleet consists of 17 vessels, largest being roughly 8 kilometers in length. They're using what appears to be controlled biological fusion, impressive for most species, but he shrugged. But we cracked that problem 30 years ago, Phoenix finished, along with about 6 other methods they haven't even discovered yet. Zara opened another file, this one containing detailed schematics. Remember when we accidentally left that deep space probe where they'd find it? The one with all our most advanced technology? The probe in question had been a masterpiece of misdirection. It contained functional examples of human engineering, but nothing beyond what a species might develop naturally over a few centuries of technological advancement. Certainly nothing that would suggest humanity had already surpassed most galactic civilizations in several key areas. The best part, Dr. Chen Martinez said between bites of popcorn, is that they reverse-engineered our deliberate mistakes and thought they were improvements. Back in the command center, Director Okafor was reviewing the planet's actual defensive capabilities. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of the solar system, dotted with installations that would have given the Confluence nightmares if they knew they existed. The moon base wasn't just a research facility, it was a fortress armed with weapons that could crack planets. The asteroid mining operations were actually construction yards, churning out ships designed using principles that the Confluence wouldn't discover for another millennium. Earth's supposedly primitive satellites were nodes in a detection network so sensitive it could track a sparrow from the orbit of Jupiter. "Director," came a voice from across the room. It was Captain Skylar Voss, head of the Orbital Defense Division. The Confluence fleet is assuming standard intimidation formation. They're positioning themselves at the edge of our system's heliopause. Distance? Approximately 18 billion kilometers, well within range of the outer perimeter installations. Kaya nodded slowly. The outer perimeter installations were humanity's little secret, a network of automated defense platforms scattered throughout the Kuiper Belt and beyond. To any outside observer, they looked like naturally occurring asteroids. In reality, each one contained enough firepower to sterilize a continent. "Any sign they've detected our actual military assets?" Captain Voss grinned. "Not a whisper. They're still focused on our primitive orbital stations and those experimental fusion reactors we let them observe." The fusion reactors were another beautiful piece of theater. While the Confluence marveled at humanity's ability to harness nuclear fusion for power generation, they remained completely unaware that humans had moved on to harvesting energy directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. The fusion plants were maintained purely for show. Meanwhile, on the surface, the world was reacting as expected. News channels ran continuous coverage. Experts debated response strategies, and politicians made speeches about unity in the face of an unprecedented threat. Social media exploded with theories, memes, and the kind of chaotic discourse that had always defined human civilization. But in certain circles, the response was quite different. Dr. Zara Okoye had moved to the facility's break room, where she was sharing her kettle corn with junior researchers while live streaming the Confluence's public broadcasts. The aliens had begun a campaign of psychological pressure, showing footage of other worlds they'd pacified civilizations reduced to primitive agriculture under Confluence oversight. "Oh, this is good," Zara commented as the feed showed a once mighty city now inhabited by beings who've forgotten how to make fire. "Very theatrical. I especially like the dramatic lighting." One of the junior researchers, Dr. River Blackwood, looked puzzled. "Shouldn't we be more concerned?" Dr. Phoenix. Chen Martinez laughed so hard she nearly choked on her popcorn. "Concerned? River, show her the Kepler station footage." The display shifted to show what appeared to be empty space near Jupiter. Then the filters adjusted, revealing a structure that dwarfed anything the Confluence had ever built. Kepler Station was humanity's first true deep space installation, a city-sized complex that served as a testing ground for technology so advanced they bordered on magic. That's been there this whole time?" River stammered. "For 15 years, Phoenix confirmed, along with about 30 others scattered throughout the system. We've been very busy while pretending to struggle with basic rocket science." Back in the command center, Director Okafor was fielding communications from various world governments. The conversations followed a predictable pattern: panic, demands for information, threats, and finally resignation when they realized that certain decisions had been made long before this crisis began. The President of the United States appeared on her secure line, his face drawn with stress. "Director Okafor, I need to know what capabilities we actually have. The Joint Chiefs are talking about nuclear options. But if these aliens can cross interstellar space..." "Mr. President," Kaya interrupted gently, "with respect, nuclear weapons are approximately 40 years behind our current military technology. I suggest you focus on managing civilian morale. We'll handle the immediate threat." "Handle it how?" Kaya glanced at her tactical display, where the Confluence fleet had begun moving deeper into the solar system. Their formation was textbook overwhelming force, arranged to demonstrate power while minimizing their own exposure to attack. It would have been effective against most species. By reminding our visitors that assumptions can be dangerous things. The Confluence fleet was a sight to behold. 17 vessels of living metal and bioengineered tissue, each one a masterpiece of organic technology. They moved through space like sea creatures through deep water, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication and intimidation. High Arbiter Zixathala stood in the central chamber of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment. Around him, his crew worked with the fluid efficiency of a species that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Screens showed detailed analyses of Earth's defenses, or what they believed to be Earth's defenses. "Assessment complete, High Arbiter," reported his primary tactician, a spider-like being with crystalline carapace and too many eyes. "The humans possess basic orbital installations, primitive nuclear weapons, and approximately 1,200 military aircraft of various classifications. Total threat level remains negligible." Zixathala's diamond eyes refracted the light as he studied the tactical display. Earth hung before them like a blue jewel, apparently defenseless against the might of the Confluence. His species had been perfecting the art of conquest for over 3 millennia. They knew what to look for in a civilization's military capabilities, and humanity showed none of the signs of advanced warfare technology. "Begin Phase 2, he commanded. "Deploy intimidation formations. Target their largest population centers with scanning beams. Let them see the futility of resistance." The Confluence ships spread out across Earth's orbital space, each one positioning itself over a major city: Sydney, Tokyo, New York, London, Mumbai. Massive alien vessels cast shadows over humanity's greatest achievements, while their sensors cataloged every detail of the civilizations below. In the Atacama facility, Dr. Zara Okoye was having the time of her life. "Look at this," she called out, highlighting a section of intercepted Confluence communications. "They're cataloging our most advanced military installations. Want to guess what made the list?" Dr. Chen Martinez looked over her shoulder at the display. "Please tell me it's not..." "Cheyenne Mountain," Zara announced with glee. "They think NORAD is our most sophisticated military technology. A facility that's literally carved out of rock and filled with computers from the 1990s. The irony was exquisite. While the Confluence marveled at humanity's ability to hollow out mountains for command centers, they remained completely oblivious to the fact that humans had been operating installations inside the cores of asteroids for decades. The technology required to maintain a stable environment in the heart of a spinning rock while conducting high-energy experiments made mountain bunkers look like caves. Dr. River Blackwood was beginning to understand the scope of the deception. "So they have no idea about the real defensive installations?" "None whatsoever," Phoenix confirmed. "As far as they know, our most advanced space-based asset is the International Space Station. They actually filed a report calling it charmingly primitive and noting our adorable attempts at orbital habitation. The ISS, of course, was maintained primarily for civilian research and international cooperation. Humanity's actual space-based infrastructure existed in dimensions that the Confluence couldn't even perceive, hidden within folded space-time and maintained by AI systems that had achieved sentience decades ago." Captain Skylar Voss entered the break room, her expression mixing amusement with professional satisfaction. "Director Okafor wants everyone to see this. The Confluence just activated what they think is a planet-wide communications jamming system." The group followed her back to the main command center, where Director Okafor was standing before a massive display showing Earth's communication networks. Or rather, what the Confluence believed to be Earth's communication networks. "They're jamming our fiber optic cables," Kaya announced to the room, her tone carefully neutral despite the absurdity of the statement. The room erupted in laughter. Fiber optic communications had been supplemented by quantum entanglement networks 30 years ago. Every major installation on Earth could communicate instantaneously with every other installation through quantum channels that existed outside of normal space-time. Jamming them would require technology that could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. "But wait, there's more," Captain Voss added with theatrical flair. "They've also targeted our satellite network." This produced another wave of amusement. Earth's visible satellites were indeed being disrupted by Confluence jamming technology because humans had designed them to be disrupted. The real communication network existed in parallel dimensions, accessible through quantum tunneling, and maintained by AI systems that existed as distributed consciousness across multiple realities. Lieutenant Commander Ravi Nakamura approached Director Okafor with a tablet. "Ma'am, we're receiving priority communications from the lunar installations. They're requesting permission to begin passive observations of the Confluence fleet." Kaya nodded. "Granted, but remember passive only. We don't want to reveal our capabilities prematurely." On the moon's far side, hidden beneath what appeared to be natural crater formations, Observatory Prime came to life. The installation was humanity's most advanced sensor array, capable of detecting quantum-level fluctuations from across the galaxy. Its primary purpose was to monitor the activities of various galactic civilizations, most of whom had no idea they were being watched. Director Yuki Sato stood in the observatory's central chamber, surrounded by displays that showed the universe in ways that would have driven most beings insane. Reality at the quantum level was a chaotic dance of probability and impossibility. But to trained human observers, it told stories. "Interesting," she murmured, studying the Confluence fleet's quantum signatures. "Their bioships are using a form of consciousness-guided navigation. The vessels are actually semi-sentient." Her deputy, Dr. Axel Kowalski, looked up from his own analysis station. "Semi-sentient navigation explains their formation patterns. They're moving like a school of fish rather than individual craft. It also means," Director Sato continued with a slight smile, "that they're vulnerable to consciousness disruption fields." Consciousness disruption technology was one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets. It had been developed after researchers discovered that sufficiently advanced AI systems could affect the thought patterns of biological beings through quantum entanglement. The ethical implications were staggering, which was why the technology had never been tested on humans, but in a defensive scenario. Back on Earth, the Confluence was preparing for Phase 3 of their intimidation protocol. High Arbiter Zixthala had grown impatient with humanity's lack of response. 3 days had passed since the initial warning, and the humans had done nothing but continue their normal activities. "Perhaps they require a demonstration," he mused to his tactical officer. "Select a target of minimal strategic value, but maximum symbolic impact. Something that will illustrate our capabilities without causing excessive casualties." The tactical officer's many eyes focused on the name in the tactical display. "Recommend the Australian landmass, low population density in the central regions, but highly visible to global observation systems." "Excellent. Prepare a focused gravitational pulse. Magnitude sufficient to create visible geological disruption without permanent atmospheric damage." What the Confluence didn't realize was that Australia's central regions housed some of humanity's most important underground installations. The Australian Deep Space Monitoring Array existed 3 kilometers beneath the desert surface, and a gravitational pulse of the magnitude they were planning would cause complications. In the Atacama facility, alarms began to sound, not emergency alarms, but the gentle chimes that indicated a shift in operational protocols. "Phase 4 is authorized," Director Okafor announced to the room. "I repeat, Phase 4 is authorized." Dr. Zara Okoye looked up from her workstation with barely contained excitement. "Finally, I've been dying to see how they react to actual human technology." Phase 4 of the contingency protocol was elegantly simple. revealed just enough of humanity's true capabilities to demonstrate that the situation was not what the confluence believed, while maintaining enough secrecy to preserve strategic advantage. It was a delicate balance between showing strength and maintaining the element of surprise. The first revelation came from orbit. As the confluence prepared to demonstrate their power against Australia, Earth's primitive space stations suddenly began moving. Not the slow, predictable movements of chemical propulsion, but instantaneous translations that violated every law of physics the confluence understood. High Arbiter Zixathala stared at his tactical display in confusion as what he had believed to be static orbital installations began dancing through space like performers in a cosmic ballet. The International Space Station vanished from one orbital track and reappeared in another, thousands of kilometers away, without any detectable energy expenditure. "Explain this," he demanded of his science officer. The science officer, a being whose species had mastered faster-than-light travel 5,000 years ago, could only stare at the readings in bewilderment. "Unknown, High Arbiter. The energy signatures are impossible. They appear to be manipulating space-time directly, but without any detectable field generators or exotic matter." What they were observing was humanity's first public demonstration of spatial folding technology. The space stations weren't actually moving, they were convincing local space-time to rearrange itself so that two distant points became adjacent. The technology had been perfected decades ago, but never used where it could be observed by outside intelligence. The second revelation came from the Australian desert itself. As the confluence began charging their gravitational pulse weapon, the ground beneath their target began to change. What had appeared to be empty deserts suddenly revealed geometric patterns spanning hundreds of square kilometers. The patterns pulsed with soft light, creating mandala-like designs that could be seen from orbit. Dr. Phoenix. Chen Martinez was monitoring the confluence's reaction from her workstation, occasionally pausing to share popcorn with her colleagues. "Their scanning systems are going crazy," she reported with obvious delight. "They're detecting energy readings that, according to their physics, shouldn't exist." The patterns in the Australian desert were actually the external manifestation of the Deep Space Monitoring Array's defensive systems. When threatened with gravitational disruption, the installation had activated shielding technology that distributed force across multiple dimensional layers. To outside observers, it looked like the planet itself was generating protective geometric patterns. But the third revelation was the one that truly shattered the confluence's understanding of the situation. As High Arbiter Zixathala struggled to comprehend what he was seeing, his communications officer suddenly stiffened in her biomechanical harness. "High Arbiter," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of confusion and fear, "we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. Ignore it. They cannot possibly have the technology to reach us through our jamming fields." "Sir," the communications officer's voice became smaller, "the transmission is not coming through our jamming fields. It's arriving directly to our consciousness through quantum entanglement. They're speaking to us mind to mind." The voice that filled the bridge of the eternal judgment was calm, professional, and utterly confident. It belonged to Director Kaya Okafor, though the confluence had no way of knowing that. "High Arbiter Zixathala," the voice said, and the casual use of his name sent ripples of shock through the bridge crew. "This is Director Okafor of the Terran Defense Coordination. We need to talk." The High Arbiter's diamond eyes refracted light frantically as he processed this impossibility. No species should have been able to breach their quantum-shielded communication systems. More importantly, no species should have known his personal designation, which was classified at the highest levels of confluence security. "How are you doing this?" he demanded, his own voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. "The same way we've been monitoring your civilization for the past 43 years, came the reply. "Through technologies you haven't discovered yet. Now about this final warning of yours." In the Atacama facility, Director Okafor was standing before a quantum communication array that existed partially in normal space and partially in folded dimensions. The technology allowed for instantaneous communication across any distance, but more importantly, it could interface directly with the consciousness of any sentient being whose quantum signature had been mapped. The confluence had been thoroughly mapped. I'm curious about your threat assessment protocols, Director Okafor continued, her voice reaching every member of the confluence fleet simultaneously. Did your intelligence gathering include any analysis of human technological development over the past century? High Arbiter Zixthala found himself responding, despite his better judgment. Your species has demonstrated competency in basic nuclear physics and chemical propulsion. Your computational systems are rudimentary. Your military capabilities are limited to kinetic weapons and primitive energy projection. Interesting. Director Okafor's voice carried a note of amusement. And when was this assessment last updated? Continuously. Our observation systems have monitored your homeworld for over 2 standard galactic cycles. Ah, that explains the discrepancy. The displays aboard every confluence vessel suddenly flickered and changed. Instead of showing their own tactical data, they began displaying something else entirely. A comprehensive overview of human technological achievement, complete with specifications, test footage, and deployment timelines. The first item showed humanity's development of artificial intelligence systems. But these weren't the rudimentary pattern recognition systems the confluence had observed. These were fully sentient digital beings with capabilities that exceeded most biological intelligence by several orders of magnitude. The second item detailed human space-based infrastructure. The real infrastructure. Installations throughout the solar system, vessels capable of faster-than-light travel, and industrial facilities that could construct megastructures within folded spacetime. The third item was labeled simply military applications and showed weapon systems that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level, defensive shields that existed in parallel dimensions, and delivery systems that could strike targets in other galaxies within seconds. High Arbiter Zixthala stared at the displays with the growing realization that everything his species believed about humanity was not just wrong, but catastrophically wrong. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Our observation systems are the most advanced in the galaxy. We have monitored countless civilizations. We would have detected technology of this sophistication." "Would you?" Director Okafor's voice carried genuine curiosity. "Tell me, High Arbiter, what do you know about parallel dimensional engineering?" The question hung in the silence of the bridge. Parallel dimensional engineering was theoretical even among the most advanced species in the confluence. The mathematical frameworks existed, but the energy requirements were believed to be impossible to achieve. "It cannot be accomplished by any known technology," the High Arbiter replied. "Known to whom?" came the gentle correction. "High Arbiter, your species has been exploring this galaxy for 3 millennia. In that time, you've encountered hundreds of civilizations at various stages of development. Has it occurred to you that you might have missed something important?" The displays changed again, this time showing a timeline of human technological development. But the timeline was wrong. According to confluence observations, humans had achieved nuclear fission in 1945, began space exploration in the 1950s, and developed basic computing in the 1970s. The timeline showed all of these achievements happening on schedule, but then it diverged. Where confluence records showed humans struggling with primitive rocket designs through the early 21st century, the actual timeline showed the development of reactionless drives in 1987. Where their observations indicated continued reliance on silicon-based computing, the reality showed quantum consciousness integration beginning in 1995. Where they believed humans were still attempting to achieve controlled fusion, the truth revealed successful zero-point energy extraction in 2001. "How?" High Arbiter Zixthala's voice was barely a whisper. "How did we miss this?" "Because we wanted you to miss it," Director Okafor replied simply. "High Arbiter, when a young species discovers it's not alone in the universe, it faces a choice: attempt to compete openly with established powers, or develop capabilities in secret while maintaining the appearance of primitiveness. We chose the latter." Dr. Zara Okoye was practically bouncing in her chair as she monitored the Confluence fleet's reaction. Their bioships were exhibiting signs of severe stress, their bioluminescent patterns shifting into configurations that their xenobiology experts recognized as analogous to panic responses in Earth-based organisms. "They're trying to withdraw," she reported gleefully, but they can't figure out how to disengage from our quantum communication link. That was the beauty of consciousness link communication technology. Once established, the connection persisted until both parties agreed to terminate it, and the humans weren't ready to terminate it yet. Director Okafor continued her explanation to the increasingly distressed Confluence fleet. For 43 years, we've maintained parallel development tracks. Our public achievements followed the trajectory you expected, while our classified research pursued avenues that your experience suggested were impossible. We've had quite a bit of time to prepare for this conversation. What do you want? High Arbiter Zixathala asked, his voice carrying harmonics of defeat. Surprisingly little, came the reply. We want you to leave our system and update your records to reflect humanity's actual capabilities. We want formal recognition as a spacefaring civilization with sovereignty over our local stellar region. And we want to establish diplomatic relations with the Confluence as equals. Equals. The concept seemed to confuse the High Arbiter. Your species numbers only 8 billion individuals across a single world. The Confluence encompasses 700 trillion beings across 10,000 star systems. Numbers are interesting, but not decisive, Director Okafor observed. High Arbiter, how many beings in your Confluence could single-handedly destroy a star? The question produced another wave of confusion aboard the Confluence vessels. Destroying stars required massive engineering projects and the resources of entire civilizations. It was not something that individuals could accomplish. No being possesses such capabilities, the High Arbiter replied. Would you like to meet one? The displays aboard the Confluence ships changed once more, this time showing a live feed from the Kepler station near Jupiter. A single human figure stood in what appeared to be an observation deck, wearing simple civilian clothing and drinking coffee from a ceramic mug. Dr. River Blackwood looked perfectly ordinary medium height, unremarkable features, the kind of person who might work at any office on Earth. The only unusual thing about her was the device she carried, which looked like nothing more than a modified tablet computer. Dr. Blackwood, Director Okafor's voice came through the feed. Would you mind demonstrating the stellar manipulation protocols for our guests? Dr. Blackwood smiled and nodded, then tapped a few commands on her tablet. The view shifted to show Jupiter's sun in the distance, a brilliant point of light against the cosmic dark. What happened next defied everything the Confluence understood about physics, engineering, and the fundamental nature of reality. A section of the sun's surface, roughly the size of Earth, simply dimmed. Not gradually, not in response to any visible intervention, but instantly and completely. The affected area became a perfect black circle against the star's brilliant surface, as if someone had drawn on it with a cosmic marker. Then, just as suddenly, the effect reversed. The dark area brightened, then began to pulse in a complex pattern that spelled out a message in ancient Confluence mathematical notation. Hello, we hope this finds you well. Dr. Blackwood took another sip of her coffee and looked back at the camera. The stellar manipulation system is actually quite user-friendly once you get the hang of it. We've found it useful for long-range communication and the occasional planetary heating project. Aboard the Eternal Judgment, High Arbiter Zixathala stood in absolute silence. His crew had stopped working entirely, their attention focused on displays that showed impossible things happening with casual ease. How? He finally managed to ask. Oh, that's just basic stellar engineering, Dr. Blackwood replied cheerfully. We figured out how to manipulate nuclear fusion at the quantum level about 15 years ago. Once you can control fusion, controlling stars is just a matter of scale. She gestured toward Jupiter, which hung in space nearby like a giant marble. We've been using Jupiter as a test lab for various projects. It's convenient, and the neighbors don't complain about the noise. As if summoned by her words, Jupiter began to change. Storms that had raged for centuries suddenly reorganized themselves into geometric patterns. The great red spot shifted color, cycling through the entire visible spectrum before settling on a pleasant shade of blue. We're working on atmospheric art projects, Dr. Blackwood explained conversationally. Turns out gas giants make excellent canvases once you learn how to paint with controlled weather systems. Director Okafor's voice returned to the communication link. High Arbiter, I hope this clarifies the situation somewhat. Humanity has been developing capabilities that your experience suggested were impossible. We've had decades to prepare for contact with galactic civilization, and we've used that time wisely. The High Arbiter found his voice again, though it carried new harmonics, respect, fear, and something approaching awe. Your species, you are not what you appear to be. Very few species are, Director Okafor replied gently. The universe is full of surprises for those willing to look beyond their assumptions. Now, shall we discuss the terms of our diplomatic relationship? In the Atacama facility, the mood had shifted from playful amusement to professional satisfaction. The demonstration had achieved its intended effect. The confluence now understood that humanity was not the primitive species they had believed, and further military action would be inadvisable. Dr. Zara Okoye was reviewing the psychological profiles of the confluence leadership, compiled from decades of covert observation. They're a hierarchical species with strong territorial instincts, but they're also pragmatic. Once they accept that we're not a threat, they can easily neutralize. They'll want to establish formal relations. Dr. Phoenix. Chen Martinez nodded while sharing her popcorn with nearby researchers. The question is whether they'll try to save face by claiming this was some kind of test, or if they'll acknowledge the intelligence failure directly. Captain Skylar Voss approached with an update from the lunar installations. Observatory Prime is reporting that 17 additional confluence vessels just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Appears to be a reinforcement fleet. Director Okafor nodded calmly. Expected. High Arbiter Zixthala would have sent for backup the moment he realized the situation wasn't what it appeared to be. Should we be concerned about increased military pressure? Not particularly. Director Okafor turned to address the room. Dr. Chen Martinez, would you mind giving our new arrivals the same briefing we provided to the First Fleet? Phoenix grinned and moved to her workstation. With pleasure. Should I include the stellar engineering demonstration? Let's start with something smaller. Perhaps a demonstration of our planetary defense capabilities. What the newly arrived confluence vessels saw as they entered the solar system was Earth apparently surrounded by a sphere of brilliant light. The effect was beautiful and terrifying, in equal measure thousands of points of illumination arranged in perfect geometric patterns, pulsing in harmonious waves that painted the space around humanity's homeworld in shifting colors. Each point of light was actually a defense platform, armed with weapons that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level. But the confluence didn't need to know the technical details. The visual impact was sufficient. The commander of the reinforcement fleet, an ancient being called Supreme Coordinator, Beltar, observed the display with the kind of stillness that comes from encountering something completely outside one's experience. High Arbiter, he communicated to Zixthala, your initial assessment may have contained certain inaccuracies. The humans have been concealing their true capabilities for decades, came the reply. We are currently engaged in diplomatic negotiations. Diplomatic negotiations? Supreme Coordinator Veltar studied the sphere of light surrounding Earth. With a species that can apparently manipulate stellar objects and deploy planetary defense systems that exist partially outside normal space-time, the situation is complex. Meanwhile, Dr. River Blackwood was providing a tour of Kepler Station for the benefit of the confluence observers. The facility was a masterpiece of engineering that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing it to be much larger inside than its external dimensions suggested. This is our primary research laboratory, she explained, leading the virtual tour through corridors that bent in ways that shouldn't have been possible. We use it for experiments that might be hazardous if conducted near populated areas. The laboratory spaces that came into view were filled with devices that the confluence couldn't even begin to categorize. Chambers where time moved at different rates. Workbenches where scientists manipulated individual quantum particles with their bare hands. Storage areas containing samples of matter from parallel universes. What do you research here? High Arbiter Zixthala asked, his voice carrying harmonics of scientific curiosity despite the circumstances. Oh, all sorts of things, Dr. Blackwood replied cheerfully. We're currently working on practical applications of consciousness-based physics, methods for engineering stable wormholes, and a project to create pocket universes for industrial applications. She gestured toward a window that looked out onto space, where Jupiter continued to display its new blue coloration. We're also experimenting with large-scale terraforming techniques. Jupiter might become a second Earth eventually, once we work out the atmospheric density problems. The casual mention of converting a gas giant into a habitable world sent ripples of shock through both confluence fleets. Terraforming was challenging enough when starting with a rocky planet. The idea of transforming Jupiter into Earth-like conditions was beyond the scope of anything the Confluence had ever attempted. You speak of terraforming gas giants as if it were a routine engineering project, Supreme Coordinator Veltar interjected, his ancient voice carrying centuries of accumulated wisdom and newfound uncertainty. Dr. Blackwood paused in her tour, looking genuinely surprised. Well, it is routine once you understand the underlying principles. The tricky part isn't changing the atmospheric composition. That's just advanced chemistry. The challenge is maintaining stable geological processes on a planetary scale while the transformation occurs. She tapped her tablet, and the view shifted to show detailed schematics of Jupiter's internal structure. See, most species approach terraforming by trying to work with existing planetary conditions. We found it more efficient to completely restructure the planet from the core outward. Takes about 15 years for a gas giant this size, assuming you don't run into any unexpected quantum resonance cascades. In the Atacama facility, Director Okafor was watching the psychological profiles of both Confluence commanders with professional interest. The readings showed classic patterns of cognitive reorganization. The moment when a species encounters technology so far beyond their understanding that their entire worldview begins to shift. Dr. Okoye, she called out, how are our guests handling the revelations? Zara looked up from her analysis station, grinning broadly. High Arbiter Zixthala is in full analytical mode, trying to understand the implications for galactic politics. Supreme Coordinator Veltar is having what appears to be an existential crisis. Their entire species' identity is built around being the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. And the rest of their fleets? Mixed reactions. Some are fascinated, some are terrified, and a few are trying to figure out if this is all an elaborate illusion. She paused, highlighting a section of data. But here's the interesting part. They're starting to realize we've been helping them. Director Okafor raised an eyebrow. Helping them? Remember the Zarian crisis 12 years ago, when their colony ships were getting picked off by those interdimensional parasites? Zara pulled up archived files. The random quantum fluctuations that drove off the parasites? That was us. And the fortunate stellar phenomenon that provided emergency power to their stranded fleet near Rigel? Also us. Dr. Phoenix. Chen Martinez looked up from her own workstation, pausing mid-chew on her latest bag of caramel popcorn. Don't forget the Great Plague cure. They still think they developed a treatment themselves through remarkable scientific intuition. The realization was beginning to dawn on the Confluence leadership that humanity hadn't just been hiding their capabilities. They'd been using those capabilities to quietly assist galactic civilization for decades. Every major crisis the Confluence had faced in recent memory had been resolved through seemingly miraculous coincidences that were, in fact, covert human intervention. High Arbiter Zixitala's voice carried new harmonics when he spoke again. The Zarian parasites, the Rigel power crisis, the Crimson Plague. You were responsible for resolving these situations? Responsible might be too strong a word, Director Okafor replied diplomatically. We prefer to think of it as being good neighbors. When someone's in trouble and you have the ability to help without causing complications, it seems like the decent thing to do. Supreme Coordinator Veltar had been silent for several minutes, processing the implications. When he finally spoke, his ancient voice carried a weight that made every human in the facility pause their work. How long, he asked simply. How long have we been watching? 43 years. How long have we been capable of interstellar travel? 37 years. How long have we been quietly preventing galactic disasters? About 25 years, give or take. The Supreme Coordinator's next question shook everyone who heard it. How long have you been capable of what we just witnessed with your star? Dr. Blackwood answered from Kepler Station, her tone becoming slightly more serious. Stellar manipulation? We achieved basic stellar engineering about 15 years ago. The advanced applications, the kind that could theoretically threaten entire star systems, we've had those capabilities for 8 years. And in all that time, you never considered conquest. The question hung in the quantum-linked communication channel like a challenge to the fundamental assumptions of civilized behavior. For the confluence, advanced military capabilities inevitably led to expansion and dominance. The concept of possessing overwhelming force and choosing not to use it was almost incomprehensible. Director Okafor's response was quiet but firm. Supreme Coordinator, in our history, the civilizations that lasted longest were those that learned to use power responsibly. Conquest creates enemies. Cooperation creates allies. We prefer allies. The two confluence fleets had been maintaining their positions for over an hour now, their bioships' bioluminescent patterns shifting through complex configurations that human xenobiologists recognize as intense debate. Finally, High Arbiter Zixathala requested a private communication channel. Director Okafor, he began, his voice carrying harmonics of something that might have been embarrassment. The Confluence Collective must formally acknowledge a significant intelligence failure. Our assessment protocols clearly require substantial revision. These things happen, Director Okafor replied diplomatically. Intelligence gathering across interstellar distances is challenging under the best circumstances. Your species has effectively rendered our entire strategic doctrine obsolete. We have no framework for dealing with a civilization that possesses capabilities far exceeding our own, but chooses to remain hidden rather than expand aggressively. Dr. Zara Okoye was practically vibrating with excitement as she monitored the conversation. This was exactly the kind of paradigm shift that made her job worthwhile. She pulled up historical analysis files showing how various galactic civilizations had reacted to similar revelations throughout history. Director, she called out, this is unprecedented. In every recorded case where a species discovered they'd significantly underestimated another civilization's capabilities, the result was either immediate withdrawal or escalated conflict. The Confluence is actually trying to understand the implications. Captain Skylar Voss approached with an update from the outer perimeter installations. Ma'am, we're detecting movement from 17 additional star systems. Appears to be a general mobilization of Confluence forces. Director Okafor frowned slightly. Mobilization for what purpose? Unknown. But the scale suggests they're either preparing for a major military engagement or, she paused, checking her readings again, or they're organizing a diplomatic convoy of unprecedented size. The answer came from Supreme Coordinator Veltar himself. Director Okafor, the Confluence Collective is requesting formal permission to enter your star system with a diplomatic mission consisting of representatives from all member civilizations. All member civilizations? 743 species, each sending their most senior diplomatic personnel. This situation requires a complete revision of our understanding of galactic power dynamics. Such revision cannot be undertaken by a single species or even a single fleet. In the break room of the Atacama facility, Dr. Phoenix Chen Martinez nearly choked on her popcorn. 743 diplomatic delegations? That's going to be the largest gathering of alien species in Earth's orbital space ever. Dr. River Blackwood looked up from the technical specifications she'd been reviewing. Do we even have facilities to accommodate that many different environmental requirements? Actually, Captain Voss interjected with a slight smile, we do. Remember the diplomatic preparation protocol from 15 years ago? The one everyone thought was overly optimistic? The diplomatic preparation protocol had been one of humanity's more ambitious contingency plans. Based on the assumption that first contact might eventually involve multiple species simultaneously, human engineers had constructed a massive orbital facility designed to accommodate virtually any form of life that might exist in the galaxy. The facility, designated Haven Station, existed in folded space near Earth's L4 Lagrange point. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than a small asteroid. Inside, it contained environmental chambers capable of supporting everything from methane-breathing, silicon-based life to energy beings that existed as pure electromagnetic fields. Haven Station is fully operational, Captain Voss confirmed, We can accommodate up to 2,000 different species simultaneously with complete environmental isolation and universal translation protocols. Director Okafor nodded slowly. The next few weeks were going to be interesting. And 3 days later, the largest diplomatic gathering in galactic history convened in Earth's orbital space. Haven Station expanded to accommodate the delegates, its interior reshaping itself in real time as new environmental requirements were identified. The opening ceremony was held in the station's central amphitheater, a space that existed partially in normal dimensions and partially in folded space, allowing beings of vastly different sizes to interact comfortably. Representatives ranged from microscopic collective intelligences to mountain-sized crystalline entities, all gathered to witness humanity's formal introduction to galactic civilization. High Arbiter Zixathala, now bearing the title of Chief Diplomatic Coordinator, opened the proceedings with a statement that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "Fellow beings," he began, his words translated simultaneously into 743 different communication methods. "We gather today to acknowledge a fundamental error in our understanding of this galaxy. The species before us, humanity, has demonstrated capabilities that exceed our most advanced theoretical frameworks while maintaining a philosophy of cooperation that challenges our basic assumptions about power and civilization." Director Okafor stood at the center of the amphitheater, looking remarkably calm for someone addressing the largest gathering of alien intelligences in known history. "Distinguished delegates," she began, "humanity is honored by your presence and your willingness to reconsider established diplomatic protocols." She gestured, and the space around the amphitheater filled with holographic displays showing Earth's true technological infrastructure. "We have chosen to reveal our capabilities not as a threat, but as an invitation. The universe is vast, full of challenges that no single species can face alone. We believe that cooperation between civilizations, genuine cooperation based on mutual respect and shared goals, offers the best path forward for all of us." A delegate from the crystalline hegemony, a being that communicated through controlled light emissions, pulsed the question that the translation systems rendered as, "What assurance can you provide that your species will not use its advantages to dominate others?" Director Okafor smiled. "The same assurance any species can provide. Our actions over time. We've had these capabilities for decades and used them primarily to assist other civilizations in crisis. We propose to continue that approach, but openly, as part of a formal galactic cooperation framework." The debate that followed lasted for 6 days. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves united in their need to understand what humanity's emergence meant for the existing galactic order. Some argued for immediate integration of human technology into confluent systems. Others advocated for careful study and gradual implementation. A few suggested that humanity should assume leadership roles in galactic governance. Dr. Zara Okoye was in her element, analyzing the political dynamics of the largest diplomatic gathering in history, while sharing regular updates with her colleagues through quantum-linked tablets. "The smaller species are fascinated," she reported. "They're seeing this as an opportunity to rebalance galactic power structures. The larger empires are more cautious, but they're starting to realize that partnership with humanity offers advantages they can't achieve alone." On the 7th day, consensus began to emerge. The framework that developed became known as the Terran Accords, a comprehensive agreement that formally recognized humanity as a major galactic power while establishing protocols for technology sharing, mutual defense, and cooperative exploration of the universe's mysteries. But the most significant moment came when Supreme Coordinator Veltar, representing the collective voice of galactic civilization, made an unprecedented request. "Director Okafor," he said, his ancient voice carrying harmonics of hope, "humanity has demonstrated wisdom in the use of power that few species achieve. The Confluence Collective formally requests that Earth serve as the capital world for a new galactic cooperative, with humanity providing guidance in the development of technologies and policies that serve the common good." The amphitheater fell silent as the implications sank in. 743 civilizations, representing millions of worlds and trillions of beings, were asking the species they had come to conquer to lead them instead. Director Okafor took a long moment before responding. When she spoke, her words would be quoted throughout the galaxy for millennia to come. We are honored by your trust, but leadership should not be the privilege of any single species. Instead, we propose something new, a true cooperative where each civilization contributes its unique strengths to challenges that face us all. Humanity will gladly share our technologies and insights, but only as partners in a collective endeavor that values every voice equally. And so, what began as humanity's final warning became the first day of a new era in galactic civilization. The species that had hidden in plain sight for decades stepped forward to help guide the galaxy toward a future none of them could achieve alone. In the years that followed, the Galactic Cooperative became a model for interspecies collaboration that transformed not just the Milky Way, but served as an example for civilizations in distant galaxies. And at the center of it all was a simple principle that humanity had learned through millennia of struggle on their small blue world. True strength lies not in the power to dominate, but in the wisdom to cooperate. The final irony was not lost on Dr. Zara Okoye, who continued her work monitoring galactic communications from her post in the Atacama facility. The species that had spent 43 years pretending to be primitive while secretly preventing disasters throughout the galaxy had become exactly what the universe needed most. Not conquerors, but teachers. Not rulers, but partners. Not the strongest species in the galaxy, but the wisest. And they had done it all while sharing popcorn and having entirely too much fun with the biggest practical joke in cosmic history. The end. Author's note. Sometimes the best way to handle a bully is to reveal you were never actually helpless. You were just being polite. Humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to surprise those who underestimate us, usually while making friends in the process. And they had done it all while sharing popcorn and having entirely too much fun with the biggest practical joke in cosmic history.